Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Yoma Daf is a very lengthy Agadata Daf. The first part discusses a few psukim which indicate that visual pleasure seems to be greater than other types of pleasure. The Gemara then discusses multiple meanings of similar types of psukim. Then the Gemara refers to Klal Yisrael's complaints about the food that they had in Mitzrayim and they don't have in the Midbar anymore. It explains what foods they were referring to in Mitzrayim, what they were missing in the Midbar, and then the lengthy Agadata about the mun and about the slav that fell with the mun and other things that fell together with them all. So the Gemara, first of all, we're on the last few lines of Daf Ayin Daled. The Gemara brings the pasuk that says, Tov Mari Yanayim Mehalach Nafesh. Seeing of the eyes is better than the experience of the soul. The Gemara says two meanings of this. One is that your seeing food is better than eating the food without seeing it. And Rish Lakish says that the vision of women is more pleasurable than the physical experience with them, meaning to say that the Yetzer Hara for visuals is even stronger than the physical Yetzer Hara. Next, Pasuk Gemara brings his kiyitin bakos eno yishalach misharm. Somebody who puts his eye in the wine, meaning somebody who drinks, thinks that he's always going in straight paths. So Gemara brings two explanations of this. Machlokas Rami and Ravasi. One says that it means that somebody who drinks a lot, meisharim, all illicit relations seem to him to be kimishor, straight, easy like a plane, meaning he does not have any inhibitions. And the other one says, no, it means that the entire world appears to him as a mishor, as open, meaning that other people's money. So according to one, that drinking makes one promiscuous in a relations aspect, and the other one says that it makes one free with other people's money. Next pasuk the Gemara says is the Aga B'Levish Yashchena. So the Gemara, again, it's Rav Ami and Ravasi. One says it should be read as Yashchena, that he should uproot it. And therefore the pasuk is saying somebody who has a worry in his heart should uproot the worry. And the other one says it's Yisichena, somebody who has worry in his heart should say it over to somebody else, and that'll help resolve and make the worry less painful in his own heart. Next pasuk, also Malchakas Rabbi and Ravasi is discussing the food which the snake ate. So the Torah says that the Nachash was cursed, the snake was cursed with Nachash Afar Lachmai. Dirt should be his food. So Gemara says Malchakas what that means. One says that it means that everything he eats tastes like the dust. He doesn't eat anything and have a good flavor in it. The other says that it means that his mind is not rested until he eats dust. He can eat other things, but he'll still be hungry, and he will not feel good until he will not feel satiated until he eats the dust, even if he eats the world's greatest treats. Now the Gemara goes deeper into discussing the curse that befell the snake. So the Gemara says that when a Kadosh Baruch Hu curses someone, he curses them with a silver lining. There's a curse, but there's also a benefit involved. It's not just a straightforward curse. It's not like people. When they curse somebody, they just destroy them and are wicked to them. How do you see that? Because when Kadosh Baruch Hu cursed the snake, he cursed him that he'll eat dirt, but at least the silver lining is that wherever he goes, there's food. He doesn't have to worry about food. When he cursed Canaan, of course, Noach to curse Canaan, he should become a slave. He could have cursed him to be just poor and have no money, but instead he made him a slave. A slave has no money, but he doesn't really need money because his master is constantly responsible to feed him. Next, it says when he cursed Chava, when he cursed women, so he cursed her with a monthly blood cycle. That was because she spilled the blood of the world, Ki'ilu, by bringing Misa to the world. However, that blood cycle makes her more attractive and desirable to people, to her husband, because she's not available part of every month. And the last thing is that he cursed the ground, because the ground did not make trees that taste good. It only made fruits that taste good, but the curse was that in addition to the thorns and the thistles that the ground is going to grow, it also grows vegetables, so that people don't only eat from the trees, they also eat things which grow directly from the ground. Okay, now the Gemara discusses the fact that Klal Yisrael complained about the food that they missed in Mitzrayim. So the pasuk that's quoted is Klal Yisrael says, "Zacharnu hadaga asher nachal b'Mitzrayim chinam." We remember the daga that we ate in Mitzrayim for free. The Gemara says, what is the daga? What is it referring to? Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. One says it means fish, and one says it means arayis. It means illegal, illicit relations. So Gemara explains each side of the discussion. The one says that it means fish, is because it could not mean illicit relations, because it says Asher Nochal, that which we ate. You don't eat illicit relations. The one who says that it means illicit relations says it can't mean fish, because fish wasn't free. Fish cost money. So how do they each answer each other's question? So the one who says illicit relations says because nochal is a euphemism. It's a lashon nikia. It's a clean way of referring to relations. As we see, the Torah says about an adulterous woman, pia achlo machasa pia v'amalei fa'alti oven. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I didn't do anything wrong. So you see that wiping the mouth and eating is a euphemism for relations. Now, how could the other one say that fish was free? So Gemara says HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them free fish. Whenever they drew water from a well, there would be fish that would come up in the water of the well. Okay, now the Gemara has another kasha. How could you say that they were complaining about illicit relations? We know that Chazal tells us, based on a pasuk, in Shir Hashirim, that Kaiso was not promiscuous in Mitzrayim. It says, Gan Na'ol Achoisei Kala, my sister was locked away as a bride. So they were not promiscuous. Why are they complaining about that? So the Gemara says, no, they weren't promiscuous in what was usher to them, but they only had the laws of a ben Noach when they were in Mitzrayim. They did not get the mitzvahs that Kaiso received at Har Sinai. They're complaining now about the extra restrictions that they got on Har Sinai. Next question the Gemara asks is, we see that when they complain, so it says they're complaining lemishbachaisav, which we understand to mean al iskim mishbachaisav, about family matters, meaning that they were forbidden as to who they were allowed to be together with. But if you say that they said Zachar was hadaga means we remember the fish, so why were they bochel mishbachaisav? So Gemara says they were crying for both of them. Zachar was hadaga, they remember the fish, and bochel mishbachaisav, this opinion holds they also were crying for relations that they missed and they wanted. Okay, now the other things they complained about after the fishes, they said it's like Yishumas Avatichim, and the other minim as well, 5 minim that were there that they complained for. It says Zecharnu es hadaga shenachal b'mitzrayim es chinam es hakishum es avatichim es hachatzer es habotzalim es hashumim. Those are the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. So why these 5 things? Why do they complain about these 5 things? The Gemara says because the mun did not taste like these 5 things, or because the mun did not have the texture of these 5 things. And the reason is because these 5 things are painful for a nursing woman to eat, because if it gets into the milk, it's painful for the child. So for pregnant women as well. So therefore the mun did not have this flavor or this texture. Okay, now the Gemara describes the mun exactly. So the Torah says that the mun is kezera gad lavan. It's like seed of a coriander and white. The Gemara says the coriander is not white. So what does that mean? So the Gemara says it was round. It had the shape of a coriander seed, and it was white like a pearl. Another explanation of zera is that the Gemara says that it was like flax. It was like zera pishton bigivolim. Flax is flat and round, but its shell is spherical. So it was the spheres of the zera pishton. Next, the Gemara says it's called gad because it's like haggadah from agadata, meaning to say that it draws you. It is attractive, just like agadata is attractive to the heart as the water flows. Another explanation is that Shemagid Lehem Yisrael, it would tell things to Klal Yisrael. It would help explain things to them that they did not know. How so? Let's say a woman was married to one husband and she got married and gave birth quickly to a second husband, meaning she left the first husband and went to the second husband. We don't know if the baby that was born is from the first husband or from the second husband. The man would make that determination by where it fell. If an extra portion fell in the first husband's, then it was his child, and if it fell by the second husband, then it was his child. And Gemara brings a brisa that shows that it was also able to reveal other things. Gemara says that it helped the judges rule about cases that came before them. Like, for example, the Gemara quotes a brisa that says a case came where 2 people are arguing over a slave, over an evet. One said, you stole my evet, and the other one says, you sold him to me. So Moshe would see, he would say, I'll judge in the morning, and he would say, let's see. So when the mun fell, if it fell, it would fall near the property, near the house of the one who really owned the slave. That's where he would get the mun for that slave, because it was his responsibility to feed him. Same thing came when a man and his wife came arguing over who was responsible for their divorce. One said she did something and she's forcing this divorce, and therefore she doesn't get her ksuba. And she would say, no, he did something, and therefore I should get my ksuba. So again, wherever the man fell, that would be the one that was right, because if the man fell by the house of the husband, and obviously he doesn't want to divorce her, it's just that she's forcing the situation, and therefore she doesn't deserve the ksuba. Okay, now the Gemara describes how the man looked when it fell itself. So the Gemara says, as the pasuk says, "Uvered satal hamachane leila yered haman olav." It says that when the dew fell at night, the man would descend on it. And on top of that, it says, "V'yatzu ha'am v'laktu." The people will go out and collect. Then the third pasuk says, "Shatu am v'laktu." They wandered out to collect. So the first one says that it was al hamachane. The second one it says it was yatzu. They had to go, and the third one says shatu. They had to go wandering away. So the Gemara says 3 levels of righteousness. If one was a tzaddik, it came right close to his house. If one was less, he was somewhere in the middle range, then he had to go outside the camp. And if one was a rasha, then he had to walk very far to find his portion of mun. Similarly, the Gemara quotes the pasuk that how sustaining it was. So one pasuk says that it was lechem, one pasuk says that it was ugos, and one pasuk says that it was tachanu. It had to be ground up. The Gemara says again 3 levels. Tzadikim got it as lechem, bread ready to eat. Beinonim, in between people, got it as cakes that needed to be baked. And the Rishonim got it as kernels that had to be ground and then made into flour and then made into bread itself. Okay, next the Gemara says that other things came along with the mun. The Torah says that it was also ground in a mortar. Ground in a mortar, why would it be ground in a mortar? Wouldn't be any reason for that. The Gemara says that along with the mun came cosmetics, which had to be ground and mixed in order to be used. Also says, ubishlu bapara, they cooked it in a pot. The Gemara says that it came along with spices and seasonings in order to cook things. Another thing that came along with it was based on the pasuk that says V'hem heviu elavod nedava baboker baboker, discussing bringing the gifts for the Mishkan, the building of the Mishkan. The Torah uses the words baboker baboker. The Gemara says, what do you think? They only brought things in the morning? Now this connects to the other time it says baboker baboker, which refers to the mun, to say that the precious stones, the jewels that they used in the Mishkan, came down with the mun, as well as other precious stones that they got came down with them with the mun. As the Torah says, the Nesiim brought the Avnei Shoham, the special Shoham jewels. So whereas Nesiim could mean either the leaders of each Shevet, those are called Nesiim, or it could mean clouds. Like the Torah says, Nesiim v'ruach geshem oyin, there's no clouds, wind or rain. That's a pasuk in Mishlei, but you see there that the word Nesiim means clouds. So here the Nesiim bringing the stones could mean that the clouds brought the stones, meaning the clouds from which the mun rained. Okay, next the Gemara discusses more about the mun, what its taste was. So the Gemara says, its taste was like kneaded oil, kneaded with oil. Lashad meaning kneaded. The Gemara says lashad can mean other things as well. Lashad could refer to shad like the breast of the mother, just like a child who's nursing can get any taste in that milk, so too the mun could be any flavor as well. The Gemara says that shad here might actually be read as shade, a demon, but the point is the same. Just like a demon can change into any shape, the mun could also change into any taste or perhaps texture. Okay, next the Gemara has a lesson from what life was like in the Midbar. So the Torah says, "Vayomer Moshe b'seis Hashem lachem ba'erev, b'seis Hashem lachem ba'erev basar lecha v'lachem b'boker lizboa." Hashem gave you meat in the evening and bread in the morning. So the Gemara first quotes Brisa, the name of Yeshua ben Karcha, that the meat they got in a time which it was useless. They got it too late to be able to cook it and use it on time for the evening meal. The bread they got in the right time. The reason is that they complained improperly when they asked for meat, but they asked properly for the bread that they received. Another explanation of this, the Gemara says that you're supposed to eat a meat meal in the evening and you're supposed to eat a bread meal in the morning. You shouldn't do the opposite. You shouldn't eat meat in the morning. It's not the right way of doing things. The Gemara has a question, but we said earlier on the previous daf, that if somebody eats, he should only eat at a time when he could see, because the visual experience is a very important part of the meal experience. The Gemara says that just so you should see, it doesn't have to be during the day. It could just be anything where there's light, so you should get yourself a light, even if you're eating in the evening and you can't see the food. So now the Gemara notes that Klal Yisrael used to nash throughout the day, like chickens nibbling in the trash heap, until Moshe came and said mealtime, the morning meal and an evening meal. Okay, now the Gemara goes into a discussion of the slav. Slav was birds that they complained they wanted meat, and the birds came and they were able to eat that meat, but that was cursed, and many of them suffered, and they died from it because the complaining was not a correct thing to do. So the Gemara quotes the pasuk that says that they died right away. Basar Ardenu ben Shineim, and they died. And in a different place it says Ad Chodesh Yamim. It was till a month. So did they die right away, or was it till a month? So the Gemara says depends who. The people that were Beinonim, that were middle level, they died right away. Obviously, Tzadikim didn't eat it at all. And the wicked, they kept suffering in pain for a month until they finally were just able to die. Now the Torah describes it as Vayishtechu. The slav came, the birds came, and they spread out. Vayishtechu. The Gemara says, read it as Vayishchetu, as they were slaughtered, and to show that Klal Yisrael at the time, or the enemies of Klal Yisrael, as a euphemism for Klal Yisrael, deserved slaughter for what they did, for all the complaining that they did. Next, the Torah describes it as Shatoach, spread out. The Gemara says, don't read it as Shatoach, but as Shachot. Change the words, the letters Tes and Ches, to teach that things that came down with the man required shchita, that there were birds which came down with the man as well in order for them to shecht. So the Gemara says, why do you need to tell me that? I already know all of that. That birds came, I know, because the Torah says, V'yamter leim ka'afar she'er u'kechol yamim of konaf. Birds came and rained down them. So I know that they had birds. And I know that birds require shchita, like the Torah says, on the pasuk, V'zavachta kasher tzivisicha, you should slaughter as I've told you. And Moshe was commanded all the halachos of shchita. He was commanded the 5 main halachos. And he was commanded that you have to shech 2 of the tubes of an animal. That's the trachea and the esophagus. And in a bird, you have to shech either one of them. So you see that birds require shchita. That's part of the Lachal Moshe B'Sinai Hilchos Shchita. So what does it mean then? So the word shatoach should just be read as shatoach, that the slav fell in layers, in shatichim, layers and layers of slav. Now one brief note here about the mun again. The Gemara says that it's referred to as lechem, it's referred to as shemen, it's referred to as dvash. For the children, it tasted like dvash because they like honey, and honey is good for them. For the slightly older teens, it tasted like bread, and for the elderly, it tasted like oil because that is what they need. Okay, now back to the slav. The Gemara says that it's spelled shlav, but it is read slav. So that's for tzaddikim who ate it b'shalva, those that ate it peacefully. This is referring to the ones that were not wicked. And the Rishayim ate it as sylvan, as thorns. Okay, now the Gemara says about the slav, there were many types of slav, and the least quality was still very oily and fatty. The Gemara says the 4 types of slav. There was sichli, kivli, pisyoni, and slav. Slav is the least quality of all of them. And some of them are as small as a tiny bird, but when you put it in the oven, it roasts and it expands to fill up the entire oven. And you can put it over 13 loaves of bread, and the oil that comes off it, the fat, drips all the way down and soaks even the bottom loaf of bread, so that you can't eat it by itself. You have to eat it together with other things. And now the Gemara says that Hashem used to send slav to certain Amoraim, Tanayim, Talmidei Chachamim, used to receive slavas with their food. Gemara says Rav Chizda would find it in his wood, when he went to get wood. Rava's aris, Rava's sharecropper would bring him a slav every day. One day he did not get any slav, and Rava said, what happened? He went up to the roof and he heard a child saying, Shamati v'atir bitni, I heard and my innards shuddered, meaning something bad happened. And Rava said, Rav Chizda must be that he died, and therefore that's the reason that I didn't get slav also, besides the fact that it says that I just heard Shamati v'atir bitni, but I only ate in his zechus, that's why I received slav, and now I don't receive any more slav because that zechus is no longer here. Now, how did the mun exactly fall? So the Torah says, Vatal shechvasatal, a layer of dew fell, or went up, and there was slav, and then it says, Beredas hatal, and the mun came down when the dew came down. So which is it? Is it the dew on top of it or below it? The Gemara says that it's between. It was sandwiched between them as if it's resting in a box between the layers of the dew. Next, the Torah describes the man as dak mechuspas, thin like mechuspas. So what does that mean? The Gemara says mechuspas is like from the word pisas yad, the palm of the hand, that it melted in the palm of your hand. Next, the Gemara says that mechuspas is gematria, has a numerical value of 248 to show that it's absorbed in all 248 limbs of the body. Gemara says, hold on a second, mechuspas is 254. Gemara says that's with the extra vav. You take away the vav between the ches and the samach, so it's mechuspas. Without the vav, it's 248. Okay, now, the Gemara now notes that the man is referred to as lechem abirim. In Tehillim, it's described as lechem abirim. So what does abirim mean? What does the bread of abirim mean? So the Gemara first says abirim means the strong ones, and that refers to the malachim, that the man is the bread that the malachim used to eat. The Gemara says that was said by Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shmuel protested against that. He said it's a mistake. Malachim do not eat anything, like Moshe, when he went after Shemayim, clearly said, lechem le'echalti mayim l'shasisi, I didn't eat any bread, I didn't drink any water. So what is abirim then? Abirim means avarim, to say that it's like the limbs of the body that was absorbed in all 248 limbs of the body, and it did not have any waste. If it didn't have any waste, why did they have to use the restroom? And we know that they did because the Torah told them that you should have a shovel with you, and you should cover your waste. But why did they need to waste? The Gemara says they had to waste because people would ship them food. They received food from the peddlers of the world, or from other people who came and brought them other food, and therefore they had waste from that. Now, Rabbi Elazar ben Partas is actually eating of the man would even purify that other food that they got, and they did not need to use the restroom based on that food either. So what does it mean when it says that they needed the shovel to use the restroom? That's after they complained. Once they complained about the man, it lost this quality, and Hashem said, look, I gave you something that you could make you like Malachi Asharis, not have to use the restroom, but you complain, and therefore you lose that. Now, Gemara brings this out as well from another pasuk. Says, "Vayachnu al Yarden mi beis ha'yeshimos ad Evel hashitim." They camped alongside the Yarden from a place called Beis ha'yeshimos until Evel Shitim. The Gemara says that Rabbi Bar Chana says, I saw that area, and it was 3 parsa by 3 parsa. And the Brisa says that when they used the restroom, they only went to the back of the camp. So therefore, those who were all the way in the front had to walk all the way across the camp, 3 whole parsa, to get to the place where they could use the restroom. And that is an explanation of why Hashem pained them. Hashem caused them trouble by having to walk very far every time they needed to use the restroom. That was part of this tzara, that they deserved it because of the complaining that they did. Okay, now the Gemara talks more about the complaining that Klal Yisrael did about the man. They said, our lives are dried out, there is nothing. What does it mean, ein kol? They said eventually the man is going to blow us up, because there's no such thing as a person who doesn't use the restroom, and therefore we're dried out now, but we're going to blow up eventually. Okay, the Gemara brings another version of the same discussion between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, which is deleted, removed from the text by some commentators, because it's almost exactly the same. Okay, now the Gemara has another explanation of lechem abirim. The Gemara says another explanation of what abirim means is that it refers to Yeshua. Yeshua is called Ish, as the Torah says, Kach lecha es Yeshua benon Ish asher ruach bai, and therefore, just as the pasuk about lechem abirim, which also has the word Ish in it, because it says lechem abirim achal Ish, that has the word Ish in it, and this pasuk has the word Ish in it, so it refers to Yeshua, to say that Yeshua received a portion equal to the rest of Klal Yisrael. So Gemara says maybe Ish refers to Moshe, like it says V'ho Ish Moshe anav ma'od. Gemara says, but this is V'ho Ish. That's not the same as Ish. In Yeshua it says Ish, and therefore Ish is more likely to refer to another place where it says Ish than it is to refer to a place where it says V'ho.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.